welcome to the main event, folks, getting plant-based foods into institutions, corporations, and cities. In this panel, we're exploring the amazing efforts that are going on right now to get vegan foods into hospitals, schools, corporations, prisons, restaurants, food banks, cities, and why this is such a powerful food policy to get behind in our movement. So I'm going to introduce everybody officially while Kirsten spotlights us. I'm going to start off with Ilana Braverman, who is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Greener by Default. Ilana's work focuses on the nexus of climate change and food. She gave an excellent TEDx talk on the topic. It's called Moving Beyond a Hamburger Default World. We might have that to put in the chat, but I highly recommend it. Ilana holds a master's degree in animals and public policy from the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University and a bachelor degree in natural resources and environmental sciences with a focus in human dimensions from the University of Illinois. I want to welcome you, Ilana. Hi.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me. I'm
Awesome.
going to share my screen for just a couple of minutes to give everybody a background of what we do at Greener by Default.
You know, I think this is good. I was going to introduce everybody first, Ilana, but I think, I think this is perfect.
Okay.
If our panelists don't mind that, I think let's just do it. Okay. That way we roll right in. Okay. So
Okay.
Ilana, absolutely. I'm going to get, you're going to share screen, go for it. And so folks, just, you know, for our community here, I'm going to give each of our panelists 5 minutes just to give a sense of all of the initiatives and a few details, and I'll butt in a little bit and get some more details. But yeah, Ilana wanted to like be really effective and give us a PowerPoint. So I love it, Ilana. Go for it.
All right. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. As Kimberly said, my name is Ilana Braverman. I live in Chicago, Illinois, and I am the co-founder and chief operating officer at Greener by Default. For those of you who haven't heard of us before, our mission at Greener by Default is to consult with institutions, including hospitals, corporations, universities, and also large events to apply behavioral science, specifically the nudge of a default, which I'll get into, to food policy, which helps nudge diners towards making the more sustainable plant-based choice while still preserving freedom of choice for everybody. So Greener by Default is simple. It's an easy thing to understand when you're talking about people that, you know, everyone's had the experience when they have to opt in for themselves to get a vegan or vegetarian meal. We're just flipping the script and saying, make that plant-based meal the default option. And then for those who want animal products, they can choose it, but a lot less people will choose it if they think the norm and the easy thing and the popular thing that everybody's doing is to eat a plant-based meal. It's inclusive since it, you know, adheres to so many dietary restrictions to offer plant-based meals. It's sustainable for our environment, it's cost-effective, and it preserves freedom of choice. And so it doesn't get the pushback that other initiatives do that make people feel like they're taking away their choice or their options, but it makes it a lot less likely people will eat animal products. So how we work with institutions is we will conduct a menu analysis and then select different strategies, different nudges, whether that be a true default, whether that might be changing the ratio of options on their menu, offering substitutions for them to swap in plant-based products for animal-based products to just make the menu more vegan-friendly overall. And then we'll work with them to design a pilot, implement it, and analyze the data. Kimberly, I know you said you might jump in, so if you have any questions or anything throughout, let me know.
I will. I'm not afraid to jump in. Don't you worry.
Okay, great. I'm talking fast, so I just wanted to make sure. So the true plant-based default, as I said, works in a couple of different contexts. One, you can, if you're working on an event, kind of change that RSVP form and have people opt in for animal products as opposed to saying, you know, I'm vegan, I need a special meal. Flipping that, you can work with a buffet or coffee shops. And just a couple of examples I'll give here before the discussion are we worked on a paper last year with UCLA, Harvard, and a few other schools as well to do a study where we actually looked at RSVP forms within different catered events. And what we found is that people were over 45% more likely to eat a plant-based meal if that was the default option on a registration form. So when meat was the default, yeah, less than 20% of people opted for a plant-based meal. But when it was like, we're serving plant-based meals and only check this box if you want meat, we had over 60% of people eating a plant-based meal.
Wow. That like the power of suggestion, right? It's just, yeah, amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Using human behavior to then change behavior and then influence attitudes. It's kind of like a different way to think about it. But that's kind of what this approach shows, is that humans just want to do the normal thing. They want to do the status quo. So
Right.
yeah.
We forget to work with that more in this movement, don't we?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're kind of bringing that back.
Mm,
One of the main things we've done in the last year that a lot of people have heard about is we worked with the New York City hospital system to implement a plant-based default for the patient meals that they're serving at all 11 of their hospitals. And I'm just going to briefly go over this now. Happy to jump into it more in questions. But the result is that over half of all eligible patients are now choosing that plant-based default option. About 59% was the exact number, and they have a 95 satisfaction rate. The New York City Health and Hospital System is expecting to serve over 850,000 plant-based meals in 2023 because of this initiative, and they're saving $500,000. And so that was just a really incredible opportunity for us to get to work with them on that.
amazing. Wow.
Thanks. And I think I'll just wrap up here. I have a couple more, but I think I'm probably at time. So the last example I'll give here is that I got the chance also to work with the LinkedIn San Francisco office, both on food and on an oat milk default. And with the oat milk default, the way it works is you go into a coffee shop and you order a latte, it comes with oat milk unless you ask for dairy. So instead of having to pay more for oat or even ask for it, it's just the normal thing. And that if you want dairy, you can still have it. So people who really want that or don't have an issue with it. And the result with this specific instance is they cut out of the total milk sales, they were ordering 70% by volume dairy milk, and it cut it to 18% of the total milk served. So those are
That's
just some
incredible.
examples of
You can
ways
give us
that,
another one,
yeah.
Ilana,
Okay.
because these are so good and so heartening. It really does hit home.
Okay, great. Then I'll give one more
Yeah.
here. Another way that this can work if you can't implement an actual default, like in a cafeteria, let's say you have like 8 or 10 dishes, you might not be able to take meat out of every single dish and have people ask for it, right? So in those situations, you can create the perception of a default by changing the ratio of options that are offered. So last year, when we were working again with LinkedIn San Francisco office, we changed the way food was labeled, and we also changed the ratio over the course of 5 months. Originally, they were serving 5 meat-based dishes and 3 vegetarian or vegan dishes. By the end of those 3 months, they had flipped that. So they were doing 5 vegan or vegetarian dishes and only 3 meat-based dishes each day. And they ended up cutting the amount of meat per person in half. They were starting at a pretty high baseline. They were serving a lot of meat. So we don't necessarily say every time you're going to see like a 50% reduction. But because this went so well, we're now working with all of the other LinkedIn corporate offices throughout the US this year. So that was another really exciting win. And we're really focusing this year on trying to take these wins in the corporate sector and in the hospital sector and apply them to new corporations and new hospitals to get them on board as well.
Mm, amazing. Thank you so much, Ilana.
Thank you.
We're so happy to have you here. Okay, so next up, who am I going to pick on next? I'm going to pick on Nital. Jethalal is a Toronto-based policy analyst and economist committed to food systems change. He recently joined the plant-based treaty team as a strategist and policy advisor, where he's helping to create a global policy framework and playbooks to make it easier for stakeholders to shift their local food environments plant-based, including in cities and at schools, hospitals, childcare facilities, restaurants, senior homes, prisons, and other businesses. Nital was also a researcher at is also a researcher at plant-based data and sits on the board of directors for VegTO and the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank. And he's one of my co-directors at the Vegetarian Food Bank. Nital, welcome. So Nital, how about you? We launch into you, and one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the board on this panel was you've got your little hands in everything. Like you if I ever want the pulse of what's going on in sort of plant-based procurement, I'm just like, I asked Nital. So give us a little sense of what you've been working on, and what you sort of want to share about some of the approaches you're involved in.
Sure. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I love all the faces on this panel. So it's a delight. I'll focus on plant-based treaty because we're talking procurement today, and I think most folks will be interested in implementation and how to get more vegan foods everywhere. So for those who don't know, just off the bat, the plant-based treaty, which is modeled after the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, has three core principles: relinquish, redirect, and restore. So relinquish is kind of like focusing on preventing the climate crisis, stopping the bad stuff, no more new slaughterhouses, things like that. Redirect is mainly where I'm focused on, which is promoting a shift to a plant-based food system, largely through policy change. And then there's restore, which involves healing the planet and building resilience to mitigate the climate crisis. And we're really excited that Nick Carter has also come on around the same time as me, and he's heavily focused in this area. So I was brought on really to help evolve the plant-based treaty to its next iteration, which focuses a lot on implementation, which we're calling Plant-Based Treaty 1.5. And there involves two core components to this: a policy framework, a global policy framework to tie together all the different vast areas, as you can imagine, are included in this in terms of a global perspective. And then there's guides, which are essentially playbooks for city councils, as you mentioned off the top there, state governments, international institutions, universities, colleges, hospitals, prisons, senior homes, etc. And really, it comes down, Kim, to helping make it easier for people to accelerate change. So I think the key target audience or consumers of these playbooks will be folks like those who are joining us tonight, who want to see more vegan foods and plant-based foods in the areas that they're in, whatever their local food environment looks like. And that's largely where we come in. And so we're excited right now. There's a lot of momentum going around, as those who know have been following the Animal Save movement. A lot of that has carried over to the plant-based treaty. There's a lot of alignment with existing commitments, and there's easy to incentivize, which we get into later, because plant-based policy really is such a win-win-win-win in all the different areas.
It totally
and so,
is.
yeah, there's almost 100. We're trying to hit 100,000 individual endorsers, but there's also over 1,100 organizations, over 1,200 businesses that have signed and endorsed, and 21 cities now. And if anybody's here and hasn't signed it yet, I encourage you to.
And we'll put that in the chat as well. And yeah, so Nital, Ilana is working on a much more sort of institutional level. Your initiatives are really working on trying to get more individuals empowered to go to those institutions and change them, the ones that they're really involved in.
Yeah, it's turning out to be that way a lot off the bat, but it is also city councils coming to us trying to figure out how to institutionalize as well. But it does come back to that, like incentive or empowering people who are basically champions at whatever level they're at.
Okay, love it. Thank you so much, Nital. We're so happy to have you, my friend. Okay, next up for our introduction and their 5 minutes, Riana Topan is a senior campaign manager with Humane Society International Canada, which together with its affiliates is one of the largest animal protection groups in the world. She works to protect farmed animals by advocating for higher welfare policies, practices, and regulations. Riana also manages HSI Canada's innovative Forward Food Program, which helps institutions and businesses across Canada serve more plant-based food options that are better for animals, the environment, and human health. Riana holds a degree in international development from Queen's University, and she's worked in the nonprofit sector for since 2012. Riana, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thank you for having me today on the panel. It's great to be here, and I actually see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, which is really nice. So looking forward to this discussion. So yeah, happy to give an overview of Forward Food specifically. So the program that Kimberly mentioned that focuses on plant-based policies, particularly within institutions and businesses. So we launched the program here in Canada in 2017, around the same time that I joined HSI Canada. And it was really born out of the recognition that in institutions, so like universities, colleges, healthcare facilities, some cafeterias, you have these huge venues that are serving large quantities of meals, and you could have really talented chefs and cooks, but they might never have been trained in how to prepare plant-based dishes or plant-forward dishes that taste really good. Because historically, culinary training has been really focused on animal products, and you base a menu and a dish and a recipe around meat or other animal proteins. So that started to shift now with culinary courses including more plant-based content, but we're trying to make sure that anyone who's been in the industry for a while knows how to prepare plant-based dishes as well. So the program has been operating in Canada, like I said, since 2017, but it actually launched in the US with our American affiliate in 2015. And it all started with a request from Harvard University that was looking to serve more plant-based options because they knew how beneficial it was going to be for all of the reasons that we all know, but they didn't know how to do it and they needed help. So they reached out to the Humane Society of the United States, asked for help. They didn't have a program at the time. They just said yes because they wanted to be helpful. And it was so successful and so well received that it's now become a full-fledged resource and training program that it is today. So it's really exciting to get to work with these institutions. We asked them to make a meaningful, measurable commitment to put plants at the center of the plate by signing the Forward Food Pledge, which is a commitment to convert 20% of what they're serving to plant-based. So if 30% of a university's menu is already plant-based, for example, we ask them to get to 50% within about 2 years of working with us. And we provide all kinds of supports along the way to help them actually make that happen. So whether it's providing culinary training or recipes or help with menu design and menu planning, we'll cover all of it related to, a lot of education for sure. And we talk both about the why this matters so that everyone understands why this is so important and why our food system needs to shift in this way for animals, for the planet, for our health. They can also save money by doing it usually, and also the how. And so just to give you a few examples, you can really feel free to jump in if you wanted to, if you have questions.
No, it's wonderful. Keep going.
Okay, thanks. So to give you a few examples of some of the impact that we've had, we work with companies like Sodexo Canada. So that's a huge food service management company that operates about 200 locations in Canada that serve food, and they have signed our pledge nationally. So we're working with them to actually make that a reality or to implement it. And over the last few years, we've run over 26 trainings now, and we've trained over 300 culinary professionals in Canada just through our training program. But we've also hosted dozens of other events like workshops and webinars and leadership summits, and we do demonstrations and have hosted galas and tastings and all kinds of things to get people really excited about plant-based foods. And just to show you one example of impact, since I know numbers can be really, really helpful, over the last 3 years, so from 2020 to 2022, we secured commitments from institutions or businesses that serve over 90,000 meals per day collectively. So converting per day.
Okay,
That's
just
the
wanted
kind of
everybody to
volume
hear
we're
that,
talking about.
90,000 per day. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So by converting 20% of that to plant-based, we're talking about 18,000 meals every single day. And, that just has the kind of impact that any one of us on our own, changing our diets, can have. Obviously, that's important too, but that's the kind of impact we talk about when we're doing this kind of approach to animal protection. So that's about 7 million meals annually, which we're really excited about. And we're always looking for ways to grow and increase our impact. So we'll be continuing that work, but also excited to be collaborating with groups like the Toronto Veg Food Bank, which I'm sure Matt might touch about, on expanding some of these offerings to more sectors as well. And I can drop our websites in the chat too, if that's helpful.
I think Kirsten's already done it. She's taking
Thank you.
care of it.
Amazing.
Amazing, Riana. And so just so folks are clear, in order to have this wonderful free program, the organization needs to pledge their 20% more plant-based. And so I think that's really interesting. And I'm going to ask you in the next round or next couple of rounds a little bit more about that and how that works. But that was a great introduction. Thank you, Riana. Okay, well, speaking of Matt, we'll put Matt up on the hot seat. So Matt Noble is the founder and executive director of Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank, a fully plant-based charity that has provided over 350,000 meals worth of whole food groceries to people struggling with poverty and food insecurity. Matt studied journalism at Centennial College and is a researcher in the areas of poverty alleviation, food insecurity, housing, economics, public policy, agriculture, and is an avid gardener. Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank also has a veganic farm at Wishing Well Sanctuary. We partner with the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies on plant-based nutrition and cooking classes for clients of other food banks. And we are currently, I say we because I'm one of the directors, we're currently collaborating with HSI Canada and Sodexo on plant-based cooking classes for chefs in the Canadian charitable food sector. TVFB advocates for a guaranteed livable basic income as the most effective policy solution for addressing poverty and food insecurity. And finally, TVFB is a member of the Coalition for Healthy School Foods. Oh, and I probably should mention that Matthew Noble is my babe. He's my partner, folks, just a full transparency. Matt, give us a little rundown of the initiatives.
That reminds me, I should probably mention just touch on Coalition. But so basically, with the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank, which despite the name has always been vegan, and all the meals and the whole foods have always been all vegan. The idea was just to make sure that there was like a vegan option in the food bank system. With food security, it's a little different than a lot of other institutions because you're always in a situation where there's a lack of food. People don't have enough food, and even food banks often don't have enough food. So it's often a situation where any kind of food is in addition to, as opposed to instead of. So a lot of the time you're not swapping stuff out. If we're providing vegan food, it's just extra for people because the food supply is already so low, or their income is so low they don't have food. So that's part of the reason we wanted to partner with Forward Food, because one of the places you can swap out meals is in the actual institutions themselves, as opposed to with the food insecure people. So I don't even remember when we started talking about it, but we're now working together, and we have our first class with Forward Food and Sodexo for chefs from, I think, Saskatoon, Ottawa, Toronto, all over the place joining in, which is going to be amazing. And that was so that we could basically just do the same thing that Forward Food and Veg by Default are doing, essentially, is get into those institutions and swap those meals. We're on the Coalition for Healthy School Food, and that's largely just to be in there, just making sure, things aren't straying too far away from plant-based. It's a slow moving train. So Nital and I just kind of sit in on those meetings and monitor things and get to know people. It's great for connecting with people, just being a part of it. But I don't know if it was last year or the year before, I was helping edit one of the coalition documents for their Ontario budget submission, and Nital and I were on the phone as I was editing it, and we got some good wording in there around the food guide switch. So that was a good little win that we had there. And then I've just kind of been like a dog with a bone with the city of Toronto over the years. I got in touch with the city's food strategy team in December 2019, and I actually met with their team with Amy Symington, who's the chef for Forward Food as well. So there's lots of overlap there.
Also an AJA instructor. We love Amy here in AJA.
yeah, love Amy. And so Amy and I met with them after I saw the head of the food strategy team at the City of Toronto, Barbara Emanuel, was talking to the Board of Health, presenting to the Board of Health about the city's emissions, and trying to get them to reduce their animal products. So Amy and I met with them, and then the pandemic happened. Barbara resigned, but luckily I've been able to stay in contact with someone who was part of the food strategy team. The food strategy team doesn't exist anymore because of the pandemic. I don't even think there's a Toronto Food Policy Council anymore, as far as I know. But there's actually good stuff going on with the city right now. They're assessing their emissions from their food, and so I'm really on top of that. I just secured like a meeting with my counselor who's on the environment and climate committee for the city as well. So yeah, there'll be stuff in the next few months that we can do with the city of Toronto.
Amazing, which is Canada's largest city, so a really good one to go after.
Yeah, 7 million meals a year they do.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. Good to have you here, Matt. You're actually
nice to be here.
So.
Thanks. I'm happy to be at my first AJA thing.
Yes, as a panelist.
I've been to many, yeah.
Well, and last but certainly not least, she's got so many things going. Eleanor Carrara has been a committed lifelong environmental and animal rights activist with a focus on transitioning institutions to a plant-based food system, including universities, cities, and federal food procurement. Eleanor heads the Canadian University Initiative and Plant-Based U, working with senior leadership, university chefs, and students to promote the plant-based transition. She's the outreach and policy lead with Canadians for Responsible Food Policy, co-founder of the Plant-Based Cities Movement, and a member of the Coalition for a Sustainable Food Transition. Eleanor, you're a superstar. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us tonight, and thank you for all the attendees that we have here tonight. So yeah, as you said, back in, I stopped working at the end of 2018, and I knew that I just wanted to do this type of work full time. So I had approached some colleges here in Montreal, and luckily I was able to get into 2 around Earth Day. So it was sort of just the right timing. And I did a couple of presentations there. And then I just realized that, you know, universities have great sustainability ratings, but they didn't really have any or very few vegan meals. So I wanted to address the universities, and I started that movement in the fall of 2020. In addition, in the fall of 2021, similarly to the University Initiative, we felt that we could do something pan-Canadian. And the difference would be that we would have individuals in the city that could lobby their city councils. So we started that. And in our first year, last year, we were able to get 2 cities, Montreal and Brampton, to pass motions. And we're working hard again this year to get more motions. And I'll talk about that, I think, in some of the questions here. Additionally, I'm on the board of Canadians for Responsible Food Policy, who focus on research primarily, and they did just a fabulous job lately with the Sustainable Agriculture Strategy. We had hundreds of participants. They had provided a data bank of, I don't remember how many answers. And we even had cities from across the world participating in this. So a big thanks to our research team who had done this amazing work. And we're also working now with federal food procurement. I mean, leadership starts at the top. And they issued the revised Canada Food Guide, the federal government. And so we want to make sure that that food guide is operationalized. And that pretty much in a nutshell. And mind you, I just want to say thank you also to Ilana and Riana. We've been working very, very closely with them. They're part of the reason that we've had success with the university program. So a big thank you to both teams.
And it is a very collaborative environment, as you probably can see, folks. There's a lot of crossover because this is a really burgeoning part of the animal rights movement and the vegan movement, what's happening here with plant-based procurement. So, you know, folks, you're all people who have been involved in animal advocacy for a long time. There are many initiatives that you could have taken up in this arena. Why is plant-based procurement and institutional transitions the place you have decided to dedicate yourself? I'm going to start, you know, first with, let's see, Nital, I'm going to start with you actually on this one.
Okay.
So why you, and I, again, you have your hands in so many things, and you did, but you have really zoned in on the plant-based procurement. So yeah, what really spoke to you about this?
Well, I think since we have a vegan audience, and I've been along this road for a long time, and I think many people probably can appreciate that it can be very frustrating to get people to go fully vegan. As much as people's hearts are kind of in it now, much more, it's still difficult for adherence. And we even saw that when you had Carrara on from VegTO talking about the poll, we saw that there's a great interest, like almost 2/3 in the city of Toronto, and yet 85% of people are eating animal products daily. So just take schools, for example. If you look at, there's just under 700 million students worldwide in primary and secondary schools. And just the US school food system alone serves about 5 billion school lunches a year, which is twice as many lunches as McDonald's sells. And so you can imagine moving just that meal alone, plant-based, which is not necessarily going to happen and definitely not going to happen overnight. But as you've heard from my guest panelists here, there are, especially Ilana, Eleanor, and Riana, this change does happen, and you heard some of the numbers, amazing numbers around that. So just shifting one meal like that in a system like that would be the equivalent of, you know, converting 45 million people vegan. So the impact of, it's just much easier to shift a meal vegan than it is a person right now, as much as, you know, I would love to see people go vegan, and I'm still trying that. But their interest definitely is there. It's at an all-time high for those of us who've been along this path for a long time. And so just making it easier for that one meal to move makes a lot of sense. And then, as you're going to hear, and I've already heard a little bit, there's so many benefits to the procuring more plant-based foods, namely that it's cheaper, it's obviously more environmentally friendly, it's healthier, it's also more socially just, and it's safer in terms of allergies. So really, it's the Swiss Army knife.
Love it, Nital. Eleanor, I'm coming back at you because I want everybody here to understand Eleanor was in corporate. And the moment she retired, she just decided, I'm not worrying about any group. I'm not worrying about anything. I'm just going to take what I know from corporate and I am just going to apply it to this initiative with the universities. And she just started. Name behind you, like you didn't have a group behind you, you just did it, Eleanor. So what was it about this area that you went, as soon as you retired, you went, this is where I got to go?
Well, as I said, universities have great sustainability ratings, but yet when I looked at their menus online, I found that there weren't really any vegan menus. So what I started to do is gathered a lot of data. First of all, we did have some kind of awareness campaigns in front of the universities, handing out sheets with all the facts with respect to the impact of animal agriculture on the environment. And then I was building up, let's say, the business case to send out to the university presidents. And as soon as the year started, I sent it out to them. I sent about 4 messages to university presidents, dining services, sustainability services. And then I was trying to get interest, and I was actually calling people up too, in addition to writing to them. And by chance, I found out that there was a Forward Food Summit in October. Riana, I think that's sort of where we met. And at that Forward Food Summit, in one of the breakout rooms, I was lucky enough to meet one of the chefs from UBC, David Spite, who was absolutely amazing. Just a very, very advanced. UBC was very advanced with respect to plant-based meals at that time. And I thought, well, maybe I could ask David if he would be a speaker, and I would start these kind of speaker series. I called them steering committees. So we held our first steering committee in December of 2020. David Spite was the first speaker, and we had Gerard Bishop as well. Ilana Braverman was there, Riana was there, and everybody, I think, was very impressed with what the work that David was doing and the science behind it that Gerard Bishop had presented. And it was called Default Veg. It wasn't Greener by Default at the time, but there was like a huge interest. I always used polls in my meetings, and I asked the attendees if they, wanted to attend these training sessions. So there was about 10 chefs, I think, that responded positively to that poll. So in January of 2021, we held several training sessions. As I said, some universities were extremely interested, like the University of Victoria, and they had some amazing changes there. So we had steering committees twice a year, the fall semester, the spring semester. And in total to date, we've had 8 speakers, 8 chefs across Canada. We're going to have 2 more, McGill and Concordia in November. And we had additionally 4 other universities who weren't speakers, but who were active participants. So with all those universities, I sort of looked at the figures for students, full-time students. So the reach was about 500,000 students. Now, how many of those actually eat in the cafeterias? I don't know, maybe 10%, 20%, even more. But still, the advantage of institutions is the power of leverage. For the amount of work that you're putting in, you're getting a lot more return on it because of the size of the audience that you're reaching. And the other piece is the power of influence. So for example, cities, it's not just the city councils that are affected, it's the whole city, and like New York City, the hospitals and et cetera. So for the amount of effort that you put in, you get a lot of the rate of return, let's say, is quite high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Just, yeah, great numbers that you're able to reach instead of having to convert one person at a time. So yeah, Ilana, there are some really powerful reasons for being able to do plant-based procurement. And one, is to save a lot of animals by, having this vegan default out there. But another one is to expose people to food, to plant-based. So tell me what it was about this area for you that was really drew you in.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how humans work in groups and how different people are and, at social events than they maybe are in their like at home. And I think, similar to Nital, you were saying like it's hard to get a person to go vegan. I've had that experience too. And so when I realized that, at a large social event, if food is just being served and it's delicious, people are just going to eat it. You can affect maybe 5,000 meals at like a conference over a weekend instead of just trying to get, one person to go vegan for a whole year, which I could spend days, months, years trying to do. What if I just changed the norm at an event? And then I was at a conference last year and it was actually cool to see the light bulb go on. I was sitting with someone at a table who was not vegan, not even close. And I was telling her how we had worked with this conference to ensure that, the ratio was changed. There was no meat served at breakfast. And she was like, oh, you're right. She's like, and that's fine. She's like, if it was there, I would have eaten it, but I just realized it wasn't there. And I don't really care that it's not there. And you just saw that light bulb go on. And she actually ended up connecting me to some media and they wrote a piece about it, which was cool. But it's just interesting to see people make that connection. And when people actually eat, like you said, eat more vegan food, whatever setting it's in, they start to realize, oh, maybe they like something they didn't realize they liked. And when you get people to start eating more plant-based, it opens their mind up to changing their attitude. It's really difficult to get someone to change their attitude or change their behavior if their actions aren't aligning. And so the way I see this work is it's just an opportunity to, like you said, get people more accustomed and more interested to eating this way, which then allows them to kind of maybe delve into those questions in their own mind. It also opens up the conversation. You can talk to people about the meat industry at a meal where everybody's eating plants. You can't really do that when you're the only one eating a vegan meal. It just makes everybody really uncomfortable. But if everybody is eating a vegan meal and you start talking about the issues, people are a little bit more interested in opening up and talking about them because they at that moment are actually aligning with what you're saying. And so I think there's just a lot of, work to be done in these big public spaces. And if we can change the norm and change what people feel like is just what we do at events, I think that will trickle into what they do in their daily lives as well.
Amazing. Yes. Thank you so much, Ilana. Riana, what about you? What's the magic of institutional transitions for you that really drew you to doing this work?
Yeah, well, I think I would have to repeat, or I won't repeat, but I would echo some of what my co-panelists have said about, just the impact and about the sort of shift that it can start to trigger, right? Because we've all acknowledged how difficult it is to convince someone to 100% go vegan if they're not starting from that point yet. But as we've talked about, and as I see some people saying in the chat, it's so much easier to get people comfortable with the idea of it once they've had a good meal that they enjoy that didn't have any animal products in it. It's the same concept as, the Meatless Monday or the Veganuary idea. We're just trying it out and starting with maybe a bit of a more gradual shift in that direction can make it seem a lot easier and less daunting than it might be if you were to just ask someone to go 100% plant-based from the beginning. So that I think is all really important and why we do this work as well. But I would also add that, as important as this is and as impactful as it is, it's not to say, from my opinion anyway, that this is the only thing that matters. Obviously, there's other work that's also really meaningful and worthwhile. And I think one of the strengths of any social justice movement is that having different approaches and activities and programs and campaigns and strategies is really important because you don't know who's going to be affected by what or what impact something is going to have. And this will reach a lot of people and make a lot of change, but there are some people who will not be impacted by this. So if you're listening to this, it's probably because you're interested in this area and hoping to do more, which is wonderful. But if you happen to be working in a different area of animal protection, you're still having a really important impact. So don't give up no matter what you're doing. It's all important.
Yeah, Rihanna, thank you very much for pointing that out, because yeah, a lot of folks on in this gathering do a lot of different work, and yeah, there is a place for everything in this movement, and we need every level being addressed. So this is just such an exciting one. So it's very bright and shiny, and there's lots of big impacts. So we do really like it. And I know for you, Matt, you're a big proponent of plant-based procurement as like the food policy area that we should be focusing on in the AR movement. So can you explain a little bit why?
Yeah, I think everyone's fleshed out why it's really great. Generically speaking, like just across the board. As a huge just food policy geek in general, I've thought about a lot of stuff and assessed things from a lot of different ways. The reason I prefer like policy transition over, let's say, like transitioning farmers, is because if you transition a farmer, it literally will just save 0 animals, which also means it has no effect on the environment either. When you close down a farm, another farm just picks up the slack. So those animals are just bred and killed in another place, essentially. Manny Ritanel from a Climate Refarm says when an animal farm is removed, the resulting supply reduction increases prices. The increased price incentivizes neighboring farms to increase their production to take advantage of those increased prices and revenue, et cetera. That said, there are people doing like in different countries that are putting caps on the amount of animals in a country or a province. And so obviously we need something for farmers. If we're telling farmers they have to leave the industry or reduce their herds, then there's a place for that. But I don't think leading with just transitioning farmers is gonna save any animals or do anything for the environment. So I've kind of steered away from that. Animal advocates talk about meat taxes a lot too. I don't like framing things as like a meat tax because I think it probably hurts us. People don't love vegans in the first place. But most people eat meat. So I think it's a little politically unrealistic to frame things as a meat tax and think that like that's going to resonate with people. And just from the food justice sovereignty movement, a lot of people think of food as a right in the movement. And those are often like organizations that are people of color. And so I don't think it's great also for building bridges with other people in the food movement to like refer to meat taxes. That said, in Canada, we have a carbon tax, which farmers complain about a lot, and that's supposed to increase every year. And that also is intersectional in the sense that that other things that pollute get taxed as well. And I think it's sustainable in the sense that Canadians get that money back in their pocket. So it's slow, and it could be argued that it's not like good enough for climate change, which is, we don't have a lot of time, but our carbon tax, I think, in Canada is pretty good, could be better. And then just from a food security lens, in terms of like fruit and veggie vouchers, Veg Food Bank advocates for a basic income as the best way to solve food insecurity, which is kind of like totally removed from animal advocacy entirely. And I haven't heard of fruit and veg vouchers reducing the consumption of animal products. So those are a few policies that are out there that I basically kind of think are somewhat dead ends for the movement. So procurement has kind of just jumped out to me as somewhere where we can really make an impact. And with procurement, it's kind of a situation where you're saying yes to something, which I like. And in politics, I think I could be wrong, but in politics, it seems like the lobby groups have a lot of influence, whereas at institutions, we're all kind of in there every day and they want to cater to what customers want. So I think we have a lot of power in those institutions where maybe the industry lobby groups can't get to as easily.
Just noticing a question, and that you could probably jump in and clarify right away. Tenebrae said transition farmers to producing crops via government subsidies. And so I think, that is something that's talked about a lot, is transitioning animal farmers to plant farmers. And there is just a general inequality around that, right, that you could maybe speak to.
Well, yeah, I mean, transitioning farmers to plant-based is kind of like a subsidy. It's still sort of a meat industry subsidy, and I don't know that it's necessarily fair to the people who are currently plant-based farmers. There's no like evidence that the plant-based farmers that currently exist can't supply the demand that there is, and so like there's no like need to transition farmers. That's why it was kind of like, if we are going to change the number of animals in a country or in a province, then farmers are going to have to reduce what they produce. So we're going to have to like give them something, but we won't necessarily need more farmers because a lot of plant farmers are just grow feed for animals anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you for that food policy rundown. So folks, how have you all been pitching your initiatives to institutions? I'm thinking for some of you, it's through very much through an environmental lens. Do some of you broach animal welfare when you're pitching this, or health or inclusivity? And what have you seen the institutions that you've been working with respond best to? And have there been any shifts in this? Riana, I want to start with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So we certainly touch on all bases or all of the sort of pillars or reasons why plant-based is important. So obviously animal welfare, health, environment, and as I mentioned briefly, and others have talked about too, there's the potential for saving money, which is great. I do find that generally in our experience of working with people who are, responsible for setting menus or making food related decisions, procurement decisions, sustainability is a really big driver. It's the one I hear the most in terms of what's driving the shift in addition to consumer demand. So it's both, wanting to make their operations more sustainable and also wanting to cater to what their guests are asking for. And because there is so much more demand now for diverse protein options and more plant-based options, that is driving some of this shift. But some people, obviously, if you're working with the healthcare environment, the health argument might be more relevant. You will find people who are personally just more moved by the animal welfare argument. And everyone likes to save money. So that's always helpful too. So my advice, if you're looking to just sort of know how to approach these conversations, would be just be as informed as you can on the different topics as possible, because you never know what's going to work with someone. And the more that you can credibly speak to any of the arguments, just at least at a high level, the better, because one person might respond to one part and want more information, or that might spark a shift in them, whereas another topic might do that for someone else, just the same way that you would with probably family or friends that you're trying to open their minds about eating more plant-based. So it's the same thing. And I would just say, see what jives, see what resonates, and then go from there, because all the arguments are obviously really great. And they can, even if you get one person who's just interested in the environment, for example, and doesn't really care about animals, if they start to learn more about the benefits of plant-based food and see how delicious it is and how easy it is to switch, then their mind will be more open to the other arguments as well.
Okay, excellent, Riana. Eleanor, I know that you stick very closely to the environmental element in pitching. Tell us a little bit about that.
When I first started the movement, I was working with a national organization, and they had a presentation sort of already prepared. And I saw that it was first environment, then health, and animals. And I said, animals are last? And they said, yeah, based on the surveys that they had done, animals were last. So at first that was quite a shock, because, all my life really it had been animals first. But obviously you have to adapt, and definitely with universities, the main push is on the environment and sustainability. They're worried about their emissions, and generally food emissions have not been calculated in the past, but the University of Victoria, and they'll be presenting this May, will talk about their journey in terms of the food emissions that they had measured and the subsequent changes that they had made. And University of BC as well, they now have climate labeling, and they took the whole footprint of all 775 meals and then assigned food labels to those meals. And what else? Cities, again, it's primarily been environment. I really haven't talked about health or animals at all to the city. They're worried about the greenhouse gas emissions. They have environmental committees, etc. So you have to talk about what resonates most to them. At the end of the day, you want to get that result, right? So even if it's not your preferred path, if it gets you the result that you need, I think it's important to do that. Otherwise, they won't listen to you. So
yeah, absolutely. You got to be strategic. Nital, how about you? What are you finding is working in all, like, there's so many, again, in variety of places that you're sort of dealing with. Are you finding across the board that you're pitching a certain way, or mixing it up?
Yeah, much like Eleanor, environment's the primary driver. I think it's easier in cities like Toronto too, where environmental climate crisis has been declared, which has happened in over 800 cities around the world already. But that said, I will say, when we met with Mike Layton a few years back, Mark Simmons and I, when we were co-chairing the Veg Climate Network, he actually recommended that we come back with health as the primary driver, which caught us a little bit by surprise. But environmental lens is the primary driver, but as mentioned, the cost, health, inclusivity and safety, equity and accessibility, these all are different pet areas. You really do need to read your audience. So for example, with the Peel District School Board, there is a type 2 diabetes crisis exploding in the Peel region, where it's about 40% higher than the rest of Ontario. And for those who aren't familiar, type 2 diabetes is really become a global epidemic. And between that and a focus on equity, there's a much more diverse region and demographic in Peel. The arguments around food security, health, and inclusivity become much more important. And so I encourage people, you have a good range of resources between what you created here, Kimberly, at AJA, and those of us on the panel, to really read the audience, or read the room and your audience, and kind of figure out which might make the most sense as your primary driver. But really, all these arguments do work. We tend to default to the environmental ones as well, because we're a climate-focused nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Matt, what about you? What do you find is working for moving plant-based food into institutions?
Yeah, definitely. The environment is big. Basically, I would pitch any institution based on kind of what is apparent that they care about. And so with like cities like Toronto, like C40 cities that have signed like the Cool Food Pledge, or like the Milan Pact, like they've already sort of made these commitments, so it's already there for us. So it's really easy to I would just follow an institution. If it's a health institution, do health. What my strategy has been most of the time has just been to offer something. So with approaching the city after Barbara Emanuel was doing her presentation on getting to the Board of Health. Well, actually, that was to the Board of Health, funny enough, but it was about the environment. So I approached her and basically just said, like, can we help you? I know people, we have chefs, we have nutritionists, dietitians. Can we help you in any way? With Yonge Street Mission, it was just being in there and chatting with them really casually over the years, because we've been partnering with them for like 9 years, or 8.5 years. So with them, it was just a casual conversation, and we were like, well, we can, bring in some plant-based food classes for your food bank clientele. And so that just happened organically. And then with like the forward food stuff that we're doing with HSI, that's really just here's a class. Do you want to come take part in this thing for free? So just offering, just basically giving people something that they can say yes to, that's easy, and seems fun, and is good for the environment, good for people, and everything. So yeah, just offering to help where it seems like it could be used, or where there's people who have expressed like a similar kind of view. And then an important thing I think across the board is the cost, like is cost savings. Governments care about money. Institutions, anything that's like a charity or not for profit, like they care about their dollars. Schools, Nital and I were just in a coalition meeting the other day where someone was saying that they've had to cancel, like put on pause, like 20 of their school food programs, and they can't buy apples anymore. So cost is a big thing too. And David Spite actually said in the last Forward Food webinar that with their plant-based dishes, they're able to save enough money because they're plant-based to then be able to like buy like organic ingredients and stuff like that. So cost is always pretty important.
And also, well, I'll go to Ilana to ask about this, and if Ilana doesn't have a thought about it, I might come back to you, Matt. But there's also the issues of inclusivity, Ilana, and maybe you could speak to the idea of like vegan default is a more inclusive diet.
Yeah, I have a slide in my presentation that I didn't have a chance to share today that talks about lactose intolerance, religion, and also the younger generations. And kind of the three stats there are that 30 to 50 million Americans are lactose intolerant, and more people of color are lactose intolerant. And so there's just this, charging people more to get a milk that, is okay for their system. Like, that can be seen as not being inclusive. I mean, that is not inclusive. And so the way we phrase that is like, make the sustainable and inclusive option more affordable. Like, don't tax people for trying to do the right thing for ethical reasons or because their body can't handle lactose. There are also a lot of religions that encourage vegetarian or veganism, and some religions that, say you can't eat certain animal products. So from that standpoint, doing plant-based by default just kind of, covers all of those bases. And also, younger generations, millennials, Gen Zers, more likely to want to try plant-based foods. I have been shown to be eating more plant-based foods. And Black Americans are also actually more likely than white Americans to be vegan. So we're just not, like, when we're serving meat as just the main option and asking people to kind of opt themselves in and tell you if they're vegan and need another option, that's not inclusive in so many different ways. So inclusivity is a huge piece of how we pitch our initiative, leading with the food is delicious and then backing it up with it's also more inclusive and it's better for the environment, it's better for your health, and your diners are going to appreciate it for all of those reasons.
Ilana, yeah, excellent. Yeah, a point that I don't think we as a movement and as advocates necessarily consider enough.
Actually,
So,
Kim,
yeah.
just to build on that, Valerie
Please.
True's the Guelph Daycare Center or Childcare Center that Valerie's running is doing tremendous work, and I just want to give her a shout out because of the fact that I think she's really helped those of us doing some of this outreach really like bolster this argument. Like it's not only a more inclusive but safer, since they had like severe dairy allergies there. And in fact, Ilana, on your point, when we were building some of the schools playbook, I didn't realize that there was an open letter from over 30 Congress people in the US to Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture, calling it the dietary racism of requiring cow's milk, which is still unbelievable that that school lunch program requires cow's milk. But in that letter, they mentioned that there's a 20-year study that found that dairy has actually surpassed soy, wheat, and nuts as the top food allergy and the leading cause of anaphylaxis in children under 16.
And just in case folks don't know, Valerie True runs the University of Guelph Daycare. Correct me if I got any of this wrong, Nital. And she has transitioned their entire menu at the daycare to plant-based, and it's been really successful and being used as a template with various places. And we're going to actually have Valerie True join us for Lunchtime Live. So it's really exciting, and really, it really speaks to the fact that it's all these renegades, right? Like, we do have, Greener by Default has become a huge organization. Forward Food is a huge program now, but it all started small. Like, all of these, Eleanor just started out of nowhere. Matt started the food bank out of nowhere. And so, I would really, for the folks that are here, I'm sure they're here because they want to know, what can we do? And so one of the things I'd really like to, talk about before we, start losing anybody, for the folks that are here tonight, what are ways that individuals can help move things forward in getting plant-based into more institutions, either directly helping with your initiative or applying an aspect of your approach to getting plant-based into institutions or just into the norm. Ilana, I'm going to start with you because I know you have some really great, suggestions on that, even just on a really basic level, like weddings, for example.
Yeah, so that's definitely something. There are definitely, like, any event that you can plan and to do this, that's great. I assume many people on this call, though, if they're planning their own small event, it's going to be all vegan anyway, so then you're fine. But if you have a say in kind of a larger event that, the institution you work for is hosting, and you're able to advocate for this, internal advocates are so important to this work. We don't get in the door if there isn't somebody on the inside who's already made the pitch and has gotten people there. And so I would say just anywhere you can influence the food you're serving, whether it's the corporate cafeteria you have, whether you're a student at a university. Any of those conversations you can start having by doing that work as a member there to find the stakeholders who make the decisions and then kind of make the introduction for us. It's so important. Like, we couldn't do our work without that. And all of our work has come from warm leads. So I would say just anywhere you can get that conversation started, we'd love to work with you to take it further.
So for you, okay, so for say somebody was really interested in the greener by default and bringing that into their business or their institution, could they reach out to you around support for that? I mean, you're US based, and so and we've got a lot of folks in the US here tonight, but we also have people in Canada. So how would that work?
Yeah, so there's only a couple of us in the US, but we do work internationally, and we would actually love to work more in other countries if we had the opportunity. We're talking to a couple of healthcare institutions in Europe right now and hoping some stuff works out there too. I would definitely say reach out to me if you have someone on board or like that's willing to listen, or if you want just materials for how to pitch that person. We're happy to share our pitch deck. So I can definitely throw my email in the chat. But what we're really looking for there is, kind of the big corporate cafeterias, university cafeterias, coffee shops, conferences and events. So, and hospitals, obviously a big one. If you're a nurse or a doctor at a hospital or in hospital administration and are able to have those conversations with people and kind of start that conversation and get interest, that's when I'd say it's good to bring us into the conversation. Or if you need materials, we're happy to share those with you to make that pitch. Because like I said, that first pitch really needs to come from someone who, has a stake in that institution. So I'm happy to share my email and have people reach out.
And we'll have Kirsten put the link to the Greener by Default website once again, just
Great.
so that people, because there's a lot of resources on there alone.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Nital, how about what are some of the ways that people here could help out in the initiatives you're involved with, and any other recommendations on sort of going for it and as an individual in this arena?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny. I just want to build on Alana's point. It really is, the internal champion component is absolutely crucial. I mean, it's not a prerequisite, but it just moves mountains. And it's just funny because I remember telling her when we first met Ilana, I was like telling her about how an old friend's a senior executive at Salesforce. And the conversation went from here's my email to here's my card to here's my number once she realized that there's potential there. But I think we even have some people in the audience here. I mean, the wide range that we're covering, it's building on the fact that there's already this global movement. I wouldn't have tried to start carving out this work myself if I had to choose, but there is this global network and base of people. And so whether you're in anywhere that has a menu or catering, I didn't even think about weddings, by the way, Ilana, but hopefully there's no stakeholders from prisons perhaps present, but like you're looking at corporations, religious institutions, government institutions, rather than just list them off. There's probably a few examples that might help here. So the city of Edinburgh is really exciting. They signed, they did an impact assessment last year after they passed an endorsement and then passed that as well. And they had some motivation from a few city councilors. And suddenly, I've never seen this before in 20 plus years in policy, that they came back to us with 38 detailed proposals under each of those three arcs, relinquish, restore, redirect, like I mentioned off the top. They're currently working on implementation in all those areas. So really with them, it's just about sharing best practices and that's it. But we also have some people like Louisa Ombre, who's in Toronto. She works at a provincial government office. It's I think it's Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me, Louisa, if I have that wrong. And she was just getting frustrated that she wasn't seeing any plant-based options. Even the veg options weren't vegan friendly enough, like remotely. And so she had a good relationship with the manager, and per Ilana's point, she just like went for it. And within 3 days, she had a meeting. And now today, like they're serving not only one option, but it's branched out. It's gone to three. And I think we used some of both Riana and Ilana's resources because they were calling it vegan beef, etc., which was not the most appetizing plate. So they've even upgraded the name, which is a key component to getting people to try and eat these foods. We also have like Michelle Labrosse, which she went to her city council in Oakville, and she got the ear of them and has been a force. And suddenly she's looking at discussing it with the Halton Regional Council, and she's been a little bit nipping away at their heels when she doesn't hear back. another key area when we've been working together, it's the matter of tying together what would motivate them or where they should start. You know, once you have the ear of somebody, so you want to look at certain things that are relevant to those stakeholders, like procurement policy, and they happen to have a healthy food for healthy schools policy. And so we have tons there. And then finally, there's a really good example of this woman, Ellen Dent, just building on the Valerie True example. So Ellen is somebody who co-founded the Animal Alliance Network in LA, and now she lives in Pittsburgh. And I met her child the night before because there's a cute 3-year-old on her lap. She went in, asked them to endorse a plant-based treaty, but just in general wanted a conversation. And the woman who runs the place, Miss Tanya, is not a vegan. She's also a woman of color and understands like the impact food can have on especially marginalized communities. And she went for it. She had one vegan day, it went well. Next thing you know, she wanted to make it every Wednesday. No parents, she sent an email, no parents said no. And then we had Valerie consult with her, and as well, we're providing with resources. And Valerie just, gave her all the best practices from her childcare center. And this place is called KinderCare. And there's over 10,000 of them in the US. So now she wants to go to corporate and make the argument to them to expand it, or at least have a pilot going on there. So just a few different examples of building on Ilana's point here of internal champions. And when you find somebody in any decision-making spot, we can, as we've talked about several times now, tailor the argument based on what their key motivators are.
Beautiful, Nital. Yeah. And good job, Michelle. She's right here. We've already embarrassed her enough about this. Eleanor, you have a pretty specific ask, I think, for folks. And that's if you're at a university, light a fire under their butt. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I've been working primarily on the top down, which is the presidents and the executive chefs. But we're also working now on the bottom up. We have the student arm, Plant-Based U, run by Lindsay Kaesla, who's been working with several universities. So if you are a student and you're interested in getting one of your universities to go more plant-based, I put my email in the chat. You can contact me. But as I said, with about 14 universities, and that covers pretty much all the major ones, we've had a lot of success with the chefs. It doesn't hurt, obviously, to have more pull from the students. You push down and you pull from the bottom. But I think you need to work both. I mean, chefs have to feel confident that there is that demand, right? And I think one thing that could improve is education. Right. There's not really education in schools today or universities today with respect to the impacts of animal agriculture on our planet and on our health. And that's why some students may say, well, it's a personal choice. But I think if they were more educated on the seriousness of the impact, and even, like I said, students who are most at risk in their lifetime with the impacts of climate change. And we're seeing an acceleration with the melting of the glaciers right now. So it's their future that's really at stake, and they should be the ones that should be really demanding much more plant-based food. But so if you're interested on the student front, please contact me. We do have, as I said, Lindsay working on that. Similarly, if you're interested lobbying your city council or other organizations, we're working on that. So please contact me. There is a need to accelerate. The situation is getting more dire. We've had the advantage of the University Initiative too was that we had the 3 IPCC reports plus the latest one that came out. And so we were able to use that in our messaging to the presidents and to the students and the executive chefs.
Mm-hmm. And so if somebody is in a town or a city that because this is a fairly new movement, the plant-based cities movement. So if they're interested, Eleanor, you've basically got a bit of a template for them to use. Is that how it works?
Yes, we have a lot of collateral that we've built up over the last year. So we can train everybody. I mean, even if you really know nothing. I mean, we knew nothing when we started, right? So here we are a little over a year later. And like I said, we were able to get those 2 successes last year. And we're working hard on getting more successes this year. So definitely we'll provide the training, the collateral that you need. And I just want to give a shout out to the city of Montreal on this because as I said, they passed a motion on May 16th of last year. There were several clauses to it. I had proposed a motion, but they went with a different motion, but there's a minimum of 75% vegetarian food at all city events. Plus there's the signing of the Good Food Cities Declaration. There were 7 clauses, as I said, but I was invited to 2 of the city events since that motion passed. One was in September of last year and one was in March of this year. And the last one in March, there were 6 entrees and 5 out of the 6 were 100% plant-based. And the 6th one was vegetarian. And they had 2 desserts and they were 100% plant-based. So shout out to the city, you know, they put their words to action. So I want to congratulate them for that.
That's amazing. And, you know, Eleanor, I won't forget everybody else in this question, but one question that came in here, because I am going to start to move into some other questions, is Watch Dominion asked, what government bills are currently in play for getting vegan plant-based food into schools, institutions, for example, hospitals and prisons? And we're pretty far off from that on the federal and the provincial level. And that municipal level, the city town level, is really where the sort of real changes can happen more quickly. Is that right, Eleanor? That's why we're concentrating on the city movements?
Yes, it's much more accessible than the provincial or federal government, but mind you, we are working with the federal government as well. I mean, they instituted the new food guide, and we feel, I mean, they should be leading by example. But yeah, cities definitely, even small towns, anything, you know, anything is good, and the word spreads. So, and I find there's interest. I mean, you could be very surprised at how interested some of these cities would be. It's not as difficult, you know, when you first start out, you said, my God, you know, what am I going to ask? What am I going to say? But it's not that difficult as we would think, you know, and once you get your feet wet, then you're really excited and you want to go on to the next. So we're not stopping at cities, basically any municipal institutions. The hospitals are under provincial jurisdiction. I mean, we don't have sort of the public system like New York City that maybe is a little bit easier to access, but we are also working on hospitals, just to let you know.
Amazing. And I'll just mention AJ or Michelle Oberg. I'm not sure if she's here tonight. She's trying Calgary. She's trying to do the plant-based cities in Calgary, and she was feeling. And in case anybody doesn't know, Calgary is beef country. Calgary is cowboy country, and so she was getting crickets. But she just recently, a city councilor said that they're going to champion this. So very exciting. And if you can do it in Calgary, you can do it anywhere. So amazing. Riana, if somebody is in an institution of any sort that they're like, I think I could get my institution to do the forward food. What's the process? How does that work?
Yeah, so we would love if that would happen. And so as a first step, you're welcome to share our resources on our website with anyone who might be interested. They can sort of learn a little bit about the program, see what we have to offer. You're also welcome to just get in touch with us or put them directly in touch with us, whatever is easier, just depending, I guess, on where they're at or what they're kind of looking for at that time. But at any point in the process, when we connect with an institution or business that wants to work on this, we're happy to just, you know, meet with them, consult with them, figure out where they're at, what they hope to achieve, how we can help them meet that forward food pledge, and then providing whatever they need to get there. So I will make sure I put our sort of organizational email in the chat. We do have, like I said, program in Canada and in the States and in other countries too. So if you're not in Canada, you can still feel free to reach out to that email address and I will pass it on to whoever is the right person for you to connect with. And then I also just dropped in the chat too a link to our ambassador toolkit. So this is a resource that we have for folks like all of you who are really passionate about this issue and who want to see more plant-based options at the places you go to. So maybe it's your work cafeteria, or maybe it's a local restaurant that doesn't have many options for you, then you'd like to encourage them to add more. There's an email template in there that you can use to send to a food operation of any kind to say, this is what we want to see. We'd like to frequent your business more if you had more plant-based options, and Forward Food is there to be a resource if you need any support. So they will help you for free to do this. So that's a great tool that you can use, because I really do want to emphasize what everyone has said on this call, that you can't underestimate the power that you can have as an individual, and speaking up and being vocal makes such a difference. And I hear time and time again from institutions and restaurants and what have you, that they'll make changes if they feel that their consumers want them. And so hearing that consumer demand is so important. And you might feel like you're being vocal about these things and it's falling on deaf ears. Sometimes it might take time for change to happen, but if a manager at a restaurant hears from 10 different people that they want more plant-based options, that might be what triggers a change. But you might be the third person in that queue and you might not actually see any results for a while, but you never know sort of what impact is going to have, or what the impact is going to be of you reaching out and being vocal, and even writing letters to the editor, writing op-eds, like anything that we can do to normalize plant-based eating really helps to change the conversation and the perception that this is something out of the norm, right? It's just moving into the mainstream, showing people it's delicious food and showing that there's a demand for it and that there are organizations who can help. So thank you.
That's amazing. Riana, so let me just get this clear. This toolkit will give people some information, like if there's just a restaurant in their neighborhood that they want to, try to move towards more plant-based options, this toolkit will help with that.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's an email template you can literally copy and paste. You have to find that contact information, of course, for the business you're trying to contact. And we've suggested that, you insert something about yourself, and maybe you live in the neighborhood, or maybe you shop there regularly, or you would shop there more, right? Whatever is true for you, so that you can make that personal connection. But just saves you the trouble of having to come up with that email yourself. I know that might be hard for some folks, or maybe you're busy. So just hoping to make it one step easier, because again, I really do think the more that folks hear from people like us that this is important and they want to see more of this, the more that they will make the change.
Yeah, love it. And it's just really good common practice, folks. Like, even if they don't have a vegan thing at a grocery store, to ask for it. Even if that it's not there, you just still ask for it, because the more that they're hearing it, the better it is. So Matt, how about you? What's your advice to folks that want to be, getting into this arena?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I definitely want to echo the insider point. Wherever you are, whatever, like whether it's at work or whether your kids are at daycare, or anywhere where you are is an ideal place to start, and just figure out who's in charge. If it's a school, talk to a principal. If it's a hospital, talk to whoever, or contact obviously the panelists here. So yeah, just the insider thing is really good. Something that I think about sometimes that I haven't pursued or thought about too much, but is with the food bank cooking classes that we did for the food bank clients of the Yonge Street Mission. There were literally, within the span of a few classes, people who were food insecure, so they needed food, so they should be taking the food at the food bank, right? But someone took a squash for the first time because they learned how to cook it. One person decided they actually liked beets for the first time, so then they started being able to take beets. So in terms of that, if you let's say you have a grandparent who's in long-term care, or a parent who's in long-term care, or your kids are in school, I think there is value, even though it's not as systemic and maybe from the top down, but from the bottom up, to you could go teach them how to cook stuff. You could long-term care centers are looking for stuff to do all the time. You could host a cooking class for them, and then maybe they'll be more receptive and ask about it or want those types of food. Same with schools. You could teach the kids, go in there and teach some classes or whatever. So, I mean, that's an idea for bottom up. And then my favorite kind of activism is just eat the food. Go eat the food.
I know that's your favorite kind of activism.
Yeah. but we are losing, there are companies start, and then, there's supply and demand. And sometimes, we see things disappear at places because there's not the demand. So just eat the food as well.
Love it. Nital said, tell about Regan Russell's father, Nital.
That was a really cute example. I couldn't help myself there, sorry. But yeah, Bill Russell is Aberdeen Senior Home. I believe he may not be there though now. But yeah, the chef's name is Bill as well. And the chef said he was open to including at least more vegetarian, if not more vegan options, and was a little bit maybe unsure or wary, at which point we stepped in and say there's all these amazing resources out there, and we can connect you to people who can help train the chef, or give you the resources or toolkits what you've been hearing from Ilana and Riana. So definitely it sounded like he's open. I don't have anything I don't think anything specific has happened yet besides just this, verbal commitment, but it was just it felt like a good example based on what Matt was saying there in terms of the CR.
Yeah, amazing. So never underestimate the organic opportunities, folks. I think that's what it really comes down to. So
Can
the panel,
I
yeah,
just say
go for
one
it.
more thing? Like
Yeah.
it's great also getting people to eat more like plant-based foods, like fruits and veg, like that's amazing. But an important thing is focus on proteins, because proteins are where we're going to make the biggest impact for the environment and the animals. I mean, generally we just want to like get more food in there, but proteins are the key.
That's what we're wanting people to swap out. There's a lot
Swap out
of
the proteins.
yeah. Okay, got it. So I know panelists, I've kept you late, but there's just a couple of questions I want, more questions I just sort of want to throw out to whoever wants to field them. Let me see. Liz Ross asks, do any of you get pushback on including plant-based meats in cafeterias? Are food service managers concerned about whether it is a healthy option? Anybody want to field that one?
Happens
Ilana?
to me almost daily. Yeah, it's frustrating because there will be places that will say, I'll serve dairy cheese, but I'm not going to serve that vegan processed cheese. And I kind of have to walk them through. That doesn't, make a lot of sense. But if they're saying we want to do whole foods plant-based, I say, okay, then don't serve chicken fingers, don't serve pepperoni, don't serve, American cheese, dairy cheese, so that it kind of evens the playing field, because it's going to be really difficult, especially for students, to want to eat plant-based options when they see those foods still being served, but then, maybe just like a bean stew. And so I basically tell people to look at the demographic you're serving, see what the most popular meals are that are animal-based, and try to recreate them as plant-based. If you see that you have a beef burger and a black bean burger, and the black bean burger is not selling, but your beef burger is your highest selling option, like really think about serving an Impossible or Beyond Burger if you want to get people to eat more plant-based. So it has come up more and more that certain chefs, specifically at like chef-driven food service management companies, don't want to work with the processed plant-based products, and that's really difficult. But if that's the case, we just try to work with them to make sure that the whole food plant-based items they're serving are as delicious as possible and that they know how to cook them. But yes, that is something that comes up, and I share the nutritional information and I have that conversation with them. Sometimes it works and sometimes we just have to meet them where they're at.
Okay, thank you so much. Tenebrae asked, how are plant-based meals not an easy sell at a hospital, given the relationship between animal product consumption and heart disease? Anybody want to field that? Like, I don't even actually know what goes on with hospitals and space and all that sort of thing. So what's going on with hospitals? Can anybody address that?
Ilana, you're smiling and you just did the New York City hospitals.
Yeah.
I feel like we should start.
Yeah. Go,
Okay,
Ilana.
I can jump in quickly just to say a lot of hospitals are worried about patient satisfaction. And so they're worried about changing anything from the status quo because they get kind of graded normally on surveys and things like that. So that's a big thing. But mostly comes down to who's making the food service decisions. Like with New York City hospitals, the mayor was bought in and the team was already bought in at the hospital system because they had already opened the lifestyle medicine clinic. They were already doing Meatless Mondays before this program was rolled out. So you just had a lot of buy-in. I can't say necessarily why it's so difficult, but I think people just at hospitals are wary of change, and obviously it's a big change, but there has been more and more interest lately. So I would say mostly it's just, and some of it could be like the nutritionists that work there are saying that like patients need to eat chicken or need to eat fish because of X, Y, and Z, and they just might not be as educated about plant-based options or don't feel that they want to force plant-based options on people, which obviously we know is not the case. But I've heard all of those sorts of kind of worries and complaints. So it also just takes a lot of time to get any change through a hospital system. There was a doctor we were talking with last month who was like, I've been doing this for 3 months and nothing's changed. And we're like, Oh, it's going to be a lot longer than that. 6 months to a year. I mean, if not more, to get a change for like a whole entire hospital system. So it takes time. We're getting there. The research is obviously there to support it, but people are just afraid of change.
Okay, thank you, Lana. Okay, this is a last question, and it's a little spitball. Any ideas on how to convince COP, the environmental conference, not to serve animal products? You're going there, Nital. Is there anything? I know that plant-based treaty has done some work in the past around that, or at least Animal Save movement. Anybody got any suggestions here?
Nital's going to bring them all Copper Branch.
I do have thoughts, but I've been talking a lot, and I saw Eleanor's hand go up, so maybe we should start with her.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I can talk to COP15. You know, this was the conference on biodiversity, and we knew who the caterer was, Traiteur Capital, and we looked through the menus and realized that there really were almost all animal-based. They did have some plant-based options, but very few. So we found this totally contrary to what the conference was about. So we had started writing letters to the city, first of all, to Mayor Plante, because she was heavily involved. The Center for Biodiversity is located here in Montreal. We wrote to them. We wrote to the Capitale Traiteur in terms of at least improving. And I was able to call some members of the biodiversity group in Montreal and some at universities. And with one, I found out, I said, what did you order? Because you had to, some meals you'd have to order in advance. Let's say if you were, I don't know, having separate events or whatever. And all of them had ordered meat-based menus, but I said, you're part of the Center for, not necessarily directly the Center for Biological Diversity. And so, yeah, that was pretty stunning. So yeah, we're going to work on that. We have to work with some of these large caterers. And I think for the next COP, that's the same thing. But I had also written to the previous COP, what was it, 25, 26, 2 years ago, and several letters to them. And the same thing. So I think it's important with all the COPs going forward to start working in advance here. I mean, there has to be a change, and you have to do it in advance, well in advance, because, you know, their menus are set and so on. So that would be really something important.
So I'm hearing that there is a big project that is not being owned right now. So if we have a very ambitious person out there that wants to coordinate some efforts. There we go.
There are efforts going on, though, just to put some hope into people. COP26 in Scotland had an entirely plant-based menu that's locally sourced, and then COP27 has like a bunch of organizations that are finally talking about this. But to Eleanor's point, it needs to be moving a little bit faster.
Yeah, amazing. All right, folks, and I'm so sorry that we have to wrap up, but our panelists have already given us 20 extra minutes because of our tech problems. But I just want to say thank you so much. Let's, Kirsten, if you can take us off spotlight so our panelists can see the whole gallery. Still tons of people here, even though we've gone over to hanging on every word here. I just want to do a little shout out, folks. If you appreciate the Animal Justice Academy programming, please consider donating to support animal justice and all of our work. Kirsten will put that link into, yeah, there she is. She's fast. Don't forget, folks, that our next Lunchtime Live is May 3rd. I hope you'll join us. And now I would really love for us to give our panelists who are super busy. You just heard all of the things they're involved in. You've graced us so much with your presence, your heart, and all of this amazing information and hope. This has really been a very hopeful panel. Can we give our panelists a big AJ? Thank you. There we go. Yes. Riana, Matt, Ilana, Eleanor, and Nital, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.